So let's start with Israel. $17 billion in defense aid to Israel and some 9 billion. So then people say, well, it's also for humanitarian. So we hear this in the news. They say, oh, this is also humanitarian aid for Gaza. Not really, kind of. 17 billion is going to more weapons to Israel. They call them defense weapons, but we all know everything is called defense, even when they're actively bombing children, it's apparently in defense. 9 billion is going to humanitarian relief, but the way the bill puts the languages in here is it's humanitarian relief to people in Gaza as well as other war-torn regions. So they're saying that this is for other civilians in conflict zones around the world is what the bill says. So how much of that $9 billion will Gaza get? Well, experts who have gone through this bill believe that 2 billion of the 9 billion will go to Gaza. So 17 billion to Israel, 2 billion will end up possibly. It's not earmarked for them specifically. None of it could go to them the way the bill is written. 17 billion will for sure go to Israel. No questions asked. They don't put any provisions on them. They don't put any checks and balances or oversight on them. But the 2 billion to Gaza is not guaranteed. There's just 9 billion going to civilians around the world in conflict zones. What's interesting about this is that with the oversight policy and procedures portion of this bill, they only put oversight on Gaza. There's no oversight on Israel on what they're going to do with these bombs. There's reports that the IDF has sectors of their battalions that are committing war crimes, that are committing humanitarian, terrible acts against humanity, and those are documented. They've asked the government to look into those. The State Department is supposed to be looking into these. Netanyahu says, well, now you're going to look into the humanitarian, the crimes against humanity against us. This is not the time. We're fighting a war. You shouldn't be looking at our crimes. Ugh, how dare you? And so they're putting that on the back burner. They're not going to be looking into the IDF war crimes, but instead they're going to be oversight. There's going to be oversight on Gaza. And they specifically say in here that U.S. aid, the Secretary of State and U.S. aid administrators shall submit to the appropriate congressional committees concurrent with the submission of the certification required in subsection A, a written description of the oversight policies. So they want these oversights that for the funds appropriated by this title that are made available for assistance for Gaza. And they state this oversight. We want to know, they say, including specific actions to be taken should such assistance be diverted, misused, or destroyed, and the role of Israel in the oversight of such assistance. So they state this over and over and over again that we want to know from the Secretary of State and USAID, they need to be giving a congressional committee oversight for any diverted, misused, destroyed, any assistance that we give to Gaza. You need to tell us exactly what it went to and ensure that none of it went into the wrong hands. None of that language is in this bill 3 or 4 times specifically for Gaza and any aid given to Gaza, the measly little aid that they're going to give to Gaza. None of that language is in this bill for Israel. None of it. No strings attached. Israel gets $17 billion, no strings attached, even though they are accused of committing a genocide, even though there's been calls around the world for a ceasefire. There's been the Security Council. Doesn't matter. None of it matters. 17 billion to Israel. No strings attached. They go on, actually, and later on in the bill, they do this Division O, which is Strengthening Tools to Counter the Use of Human Shields Act, Section 1. Says this division may be cited as the Strengthening Tools to Counter the Use of Human Shields Act. It shall be the policy of the United States to fully implement and enforce sanctions against terrorist organizations and other malign actors that use innocent civilians as human shields. Okay, they say that, but then they don't tell us what being a human shield actually means. Is that a bunker under a civilian location? Well, we know that Israel has bunkers in Tel Aviv under the civilian population. Are they using human shields? What is the definition of human shields? They don't give us that definition. So, that's what this portion of the bill is. It's just no strings attached money to Israel, no guaranteed money for Gaza. If there is any money that is given to Gaza, it has to go through extreme oversight, making it extremely cumbersome and difficult. And the likelihood that the pro Israel crowd will come along and say that money wasn't actually used for humanitarian efforts. We know that money ended up in the hands of Hamas. And so no more money for Gazans. Okay, let's move on to Ukraine. Um, this was phrased as a loan, right? So they phrased this Ukraine, the aid going to Ukraine, $61 billion. They finally got this through. This was something Republicans were not wanting to do. Democrats absolutely wanted to do. The way they got Republicans on board was Donald Trump came up with this plan of, well, why don't you just give it to them in a loan? Don't just give them money, make it a loan. Suddenly, a bunch of Republicans jump on board with that and they say, all right, cool. That sounds like a great idea. Except it's not really a loan. It's totally and completely cancelable. It's a gift because you know that the president will cancel it. In fact, prior to November of 2024, this year, so while Joe Biden is still in office, he's able to cancel 50% of the $61 billion. And the other remaining 50% that's not canceled can be canceled after January 1st of 2026, I believe is the date. Yes, any remaining indebtedness to the government of Ukraine under this section at any time after January 1st, 2026 can then be canceled. The president of the United States is able to do that. So it's a sham joke of a loan. It's not a loan. It's 100% it's a gift. Now, Lindsey Graham has a plan, right? And he says once Ukraine gets back on its feet, they will be an economic powerhouse because of their access to mass deposits of critical minerals, oil, and gas. Oh, so we're going to pillage and plunder the place. So we either are going to cancel their loans and just say, yeah, we just said it was a loan in order to get it through Congress, in order to appease the American people. Because, these Republicans clearly in Congress that claimed they didn't want to give the funding to Ukraine, they were just trying to appease their base, the voters who don't want to continue funding this war. So then they turned around and says, well, but it's a loan, so it's cool. And then the voters fell for it, or maybe the voters didn't. I don't know. But certainly the Republicans in Congress felt like they could at least pull the wool over our eyes by saying, well, it's a loan, so it's cool. And then they wrote into this, but you can cancel all of it by January 2026. Half of it will be canceled November 15th of 2024. And the remaining, it's to be seen. Because if Republicans get in power, so if Donald Trump wins the election, then he could maybe then turn to Ukraine and say, well, okay, we're not going to cancel this debt, but what we're going to do is trade. We're going to pillage and plunder your resources. And that'll be and then we'll cancel your debt in exchange for us gaining control over your oil and gas and critical minerals. This bill also allows for the seizure of Russian assets in order to finance the reconstruction of Ukraine. This money is not to repay the loan. So they cannot use the Russian assets for this $61 billion. That $61 billion has to be paid back either through cancellation or through pillage and plunder. Seizure of Russian assets is specifically for rebuilding Ukraine. Although, let's read the language because there's probably a way around it. I'm sure the United States could probably siphon off some of this money for itself. First of all, they say that the seizure of Russian assets is not just Russians. It is the seizure of Russian aggressor state assets. And they define Russian aggressor state as Russia and pretty much anybody who sides with Russia, anybody who helps Russia in any way. So right now they put Belarus in this bill, but the language is murky. And they could extend that definition of Russian aggressor state to include anybody that they think is giving assistance to Russia, so that they can start seizing assets for a bunch of these different foreign adversaries that they don't like, including Iran, including China, right? Also, by the way, I just want to point out what they defined the United States. So they defined Russian aggressor state, and then they defined the United States. And I just thought this was interesting. The United States, the term United States means the several states, the District of Columbia, the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico, the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands, America Samoa, Guam, the United States Virgin Islands, and any other territory or possession of the United States. I know we know this, but sometimes it's good to hear it as a reminder that we have all these territories that are not given the same equality when it comes to voting rights inside of the United States Congress. yet we occupy these lands. You know, these are territories. Anyway, it's just, we have to remember we do still have these territories. Okay, so they say in this bill that approximately, what is this number? Um, how many zeros? This is a lot of zeros. So let's see, that would be 100,000, that would be 100 million, 300 billion. So they're saying approximately $300 billion of Russian sovereign assets have been immobilized worldwide. So they're going to seize $300 billion in Russian assets. Only a small fraction of those assets, 1 to 2%, or between 4 billion and 5 billion, are reportedly subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. The vast majority of immobilized Russian sovereign assets, approximately $190 billion, are reportedly subject to the jurisdiction of Belgium. The government of Belgium has publicly indicated that any action by that government regarding those assets would be predicated on support by the G7. And the United States will get the G7 to do whatever the United States wants. So they're basically saying, look, we might only control four to $5 billion in Russian assets of the 300 billion that are out there, but Belgium's got a lot. They got 190 billion. And so we're going to take it. So the president may seize, confiscate, transfer, or vest any Russian aggressor state's sovereign assets in whole or in part, and including any interest or interests in such assets, subject to the jurisdiction of the United States, for the purpose of transferring those funds to the Ukraine Support Fund established under subsection D. The following are permissible uses of the funds in the Ukraine Support Fund pursuant to paragraph 1: making contributions to an international body, fund, or mechanism established consistent with section 105A that is charged with determining and administering compensation or providing assistance to Ukraine. So that actually does sound like they could take some of these billions and pay the United States back. Supporting reconstruction, rebuilding, and recovering efforts in Ukraine, providing economic and humanitarian assistance to the people of Ukraine. Okay, so they're going to steal this money from Russia. This is why the dollar is losing its value. The world is not going to stand for this. They're going to say, okay, so just the minute that we're not even at war with you, but we engage in a war with a different country. I mean, look, Ukraine is not in NATO. This is not part of the G7. And Russia and Ukraine are at war. These are two countries that are not at all really affiliated with the West or the United States. They're at war with each other. And because of that, we're going to steal Russia's assets. This is why the world doesn't trust us. I mean, look, it's sure if you're going to be at war with us, but these are two countries that really have nothing to do with us. They're at war, and we're going to steal their assets because we just take the side of one over the other. So that is what they're planning on doing when it comes to Ukraine: pillage, plunder, steal, and give taxpayer dollars away. And you know what? You and I aren't going to see any of that money back. So they're going to siphon that money from us, put us further into debt. We're $34 trillion in debt. I guess what's another $95 billion? And they're going to siphon all of these resources, but who's going to end up seeing those? Is it going to be you and me? No. Are they going to be rebuilding the United States like they're going to be rebuilding Ukraine? No. Hey guys, thank you for watching this clip from the full Kim Iversen show, which you could catch just by heading to that link down below, KimIversonShow.com. You can watch the full show from what you just watched, or you could catch the full show live Monday through Friday, live streams, 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern at KimIversonShow.com. See you then. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Never miss an episode. Never miss a clip. Never miss a segment. Thanks, guys.